All right. So, once again, welcome to the introductory workshop on transcending inner barriers. I'm excited to be here with you all today. Again, there's some familiar names and faces, and it's like nice to see you. And also, welcome, a very special welcome to all of the newer people that I haven't met or worked with before. I'm glad you could make it to this presentation today, and I look forward to sharing this information with you. And so, just before we get into the details, just a little bit about me for those who don't know me yet. So, obviously, my name is Candy Whitfield. Sorry, I need to back up here. Um, I'm having technical difficulties. Please excuse me for a minute. There we go. So my name is Candy Whitfield. I have a master's degree in counseling psychology. I worked as a therapist for 15 years and have been coaching since 2011. So obviously there's been some overlap of years of doing both therapy and coaching. And then in more recent years, moving fully into coaching people, particularly in the area of health and well-being and quality of life, as well as offering coaching supervision and mentorship to other coaches. And so, when I look back, I don't know exactly how many people that I've worked with to date so far, but it's in the thousands. So, through my professional experience of working with so many people in my training, and then also my own personal experience of a health and well-being journey over the course of my life and experiencing some setbacks along the way with that has really led me to a place of more deeply looking at what creates sustainability, what creates resilience, and also, what helps us to move into a place of meaning and purpose and quality of life, even before maybe the health and well-being components are ideal. And so that's more working in the area of transformation or self-actualization. And we're going to get into that a little bit today. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at or where I've come from so that you have a little bit of that background. And so, just before we get into the material, just a legal disclaimer. So, this workshop is for educational purposes only. You're voluntarily electing to participate, which means that you accept full responsibility for yourself. I can't imagine in any way that this is going to create any risk or loss, but I have to include that in there for legal reasons. So, that's there. The workshop is being recorded and it will be available for public viewing on my YouTube channel. So just know that, when we're off of the PowerPoint and into the question and answer, I will be spotlighted. But if you do speak out a question, just know your voice will be on that recording. Of course, there's the alternative. You can pop questions into the chat as well, and I will answer them that way as well. And then, of course, this information is copywritten belonging to me. The sources from which, I've drawn on to the work that we're going to be doing comes primarily from the field of positive psychology. So I trained in positive psychology back in 2014, 2015. It also comes from the work of Dr. Claire Zammit. So she works in the area of empowering women and women-centered coaching, which is a form of transformational coaching. So there's a lot of her influence in this work that we'll be doing and discussing. And of course, my personal and professional experiences in there as well. So quick overview of what we're going to be covering. So we've got just a little over an hour left today for our time. We're going to talk about why is this important? Why is it important to transcend our inner barriers or work at this level? And how is this different from brain retraining or brain retraining coaching? And, part of our exploration around that is going to be discussing a little bit about self actualization. So, self actualization is what we're doing when we're doing deeper transformational work. We're working at that level. And that'll become clear as we get into that here in a minute. And we're going to spend some time talking about the steps to identify and change those inner barriers. that we all come up against. And so, just given our time today, obviously, we're not going to be able to go in depth into all of these areas, but I will give you an overview and a general idea of the process and what that entails. And then we're going to spend a little bit more concentrated time on the first two parts that are really the foundation for doing this work, which are cultivating a growth mindset and accessing our inner resources. And so we're going to do a little guided practice and exercise together around inner resources. We'll do some self-reflection around mindsets. So there will be some experiential pieces with this today. And then towards the end, I'm going to share with you the group coaching opportunity that's coming up at the end of this month for those who resonate with this work and want to take it deeper. And then, of course, there's going to be lots of time for question and answer at the end. All right. And actually just backing up a minute, before we move on, some of this work may be familiar to some of you, some of it might be completely brand new. And either way, that's great. Like, you are exactly where you need to be. And for those of you that there's already a level of familiarity, I invite you to really step into a place of curiosity and openness and receptivity to see how you can gain deeper insight and awareness and experience through revisiting something again. Like, when we step into that place of openness and growth, we often realize that there is layers to our understanding, layers to our experience. And so this is a beautiful opportunity to deepen that awareness, deepen that experience. All right, so why do this work? Why is this important? And it's because it takes us beyond recovery toward becoming our best self. So this isn't just about alleviating symptoms. This is about actualizing, more of our purpose and meaning and potential in our lives. And I don't know how many of you can relate to this. You can raise your hand if you do, but there's often this feeling of wanting more, like that deeper level of meaning and purpose, or having value and quality of life, that sometimes is missing, especially when we're on a health and recovery journey. That there's this yearning, there's this longing, or this impulse to move towards that, or feeling that that's been missing. And so transformational coaching work, which is what the category that this work falls into, is really about bringing more of that in, even while we may still be on our journey, of reclaiming health and well-being. And this self-actualization work, or transformational work, is necessary in order for us to thrive or achieve our potentials. And so another way to think about that, or look at that, is we cannot thrive if we're still coming up against inner barriers that are keeping us stuck or keeping us in a place of limitation, right? And those limitations often, actually, I'm not going to say that now. We'll get into that a little bit more in a little bit here. I just want to keep on track with what we're talking about. The other reason to do this work is because this is providing tools and ways of being that help us navigate the rest of our lives. So this goes beyond just reclaiming our health to a way of being in the world that is not only more sustainable, but it generates more possibilities and potentials for what's available to us. So really, we're generating, that place of a little bit more meaning and purpose, that opening up to possibility and potential for what's available, so that we can have a deeper, fulfilling, richer life experience. So how does this differ from brain retraining? So what's different about this? So transformational coaching work is about creating change at the level of identity. So that's who we are, and how we perceive ourselves to be, and how from that belief or identity of who we are and how we perceive ourselves, that influences how we interact with other people and how we engage in the world, and the behaviors and habits that we maybe adopt or employ in our lives. And so it's a deeper level of being able to really become more aware of how that's playing out in our current life experiences and what we want to start to explore or look at around that in a way that's going to help us move forward, in a way that's going to help us um, overcome the old limitations or the old stuck patterns that perhaps keep showing up or continuing to be repeated. So I really see this as being a next step after brain retraining. And that being said, you don't have to be completed in brain retraining in order to do this next level of work, but it is important that you've had a certain level of recovery or that you have a certain level of functioning and that there is the capacity within you to be open to potential and possibility, and the capacity within you to connect at least a little bit with elevated emotions or your inner strengths and resources. And so, this isn't for people who are sort of new to the brain retraining journey or in a really deep, difficult, stuck place where there's a lot of symptoms. This is a place that comes in, a little bit later on. And it takes us beyond, in my experience, beyond what is capable of what we're capable of achieving through brain retraining alone, right? So it's really stepping into that thriving, that place of becoming the best version of yourself. And I don't know about you, but for myself in my own journey, there did come a point where it's like I wanted more. And I feel that even to this day, like that impulse to become the best version of myself, to have a life that's meaningful and to live in a way that is aligned with how I want to be in the world and aligned with my values and that feels fulfilling, despite what physical limitations may or may not be there. And so it really is about shifting our way of being and interacting with life and connected to that possibility and potential. And what happens when we're working at the level of identity, when we're working at the level of overcoming inner barriers, when we really step into this work, it can lead to some very profound, sustainable changes for people. And so just, a couple of examples I can think of in this moment of clients that I've worked with. One in particular, she was finding that life was feeling dull or meaningless. Like she just didn't feel her sort of orientation was there's got to be more to life than this, like she could really sense into that feeling and that deeper longing for more. And what she realized as we went through this process and she connected to those deeper desires and longings, that part of what she was desiring was to shift her work to something that was a lot more meaningful and uplifting and inspiring to her. And in this case, it was to start teaching classes at a university level. And what she recognized as we went through the exploration of inner barriers was that she had beliefs about herself and what was and wasn't possible for her that were really getting in the way of even being able to start to put herself out there to play in the possibility that this could be something that she could do. So there was a question of sort of her own confidence. There was a question of feeling like an imposter or I'm not good enough. I don't have something to offer, even though at the same time there was this deep longing for being able to help people in this way, being able to teach students something that was very meaningful for her. And so through the process, and she was part of my last group, through the process of transcending inner barriers, she was able to get to a point where she did actually apply for a professor job and got it, teaching a class that was meaningful to her. And of course, stepping into that brought up some of that feelings of not good enough or being a little bit of an imposter in the class. And through this work, she was able to really become aware of that and identify it and learn ways of transcending that experience. And so by the end of that course that she taught, she was in a place of strength and confidence within herself and her capacity. So even the way that she showed up in the classroom was very different from where she started, and the students were really, open and receptive to that, and her class actually got some really powerful positive feedback for how she was orienting. And it all started with that place of being able to recognize what she was longing for, and then doing the inner work necessary to bring this into the realm of possibility, and to start to look at how do we respond to this or engage within this in a different way that then opens up possibility and potential. And now, having completed that, she's really recognizing that, she wants to go even further. There's other things that she wants for her life. And she's talking in the area of career, but also noticing how that's changing all the other areas of her life, how it's changing her relationship with herself, the relationship with the people that are closer to her, as she's stepping into this new way of being. Another example of one of, I would say, the most profound shifts that I saw in a client, and this was a number of years ago now, was someone who, she had this deeper longing for um, a deep, significant relationship in her life, and for wanting kids, but really feeling, based on her past experiences in family dynamics and in relationship, that she didn't feel like she was able to have healthy relationships, that she couldn't really she was scared or had a lot of fear that she couldn't really show up in that way or wouldn't be able to, and so didn't want to get herself into a situation that she didn't feel that she could navigate in a functional way. Like, that was really important to her. And so through this exploration of self and inquiry, and looking at the barriers, looking at the old assumptions and expectations, and starting to play in that realm of growth and possibility, she was able to release the parts of her that were stuck in an old story and step into a new story of who she was and how she could be in the world and what she was capable of. And it really opened up possibility. And, this was, I would say, probably 7 or 8 years ago. So since that experience, she's gotten married, she has a child, and, she's able to show up in a way that she's proud of. And it's changed her relationship with herself along the way of doing that, right? And it's opened up more possibility and potential. So in her case, it was starting in the area of relationship, but as she gained successes in that area, it started to translate into what else is possible in my life? What potential do I want to start to dream up and see for myself as possibilities for my future? And, yesterday, actually, I had a follow-up group for the group of people that went through the Transcending Inner Barriers course in the fall, and it was wonderful. The vast majority of people in that group chose to come and do a follow-up because they really recognized how much of a difference this was making in their lives. And so it was nice to hear, every single person had something to share around deeper clarity, deeper awareness and insight that they were able to translate into their behavior and their action and how they're showing up, and being able to challenge, some of those old limitations and assumptions that have been getting in the way. And I won't go on too much longer about this, but some of the more profound pieces, or one of the more profound pieces, was someone who was experiencing a lot of anxiety and a lot of fear that was getting in the way of doing the things that she really wanted to be able to do, and in some cases, activities of daily living. And by going through this process and creating a different relationship with herself, and recognizing that she had some limiting beliefs about, you know, having internalized that inability to do things as her not being good enough, her somehow being defective, and by being able to recognize that piece of I'm not good enough, and how that was bringing in shame and actually keeping her stuck, we were able to get to a place where she could start to step into a new story and a new relationship with herself that then opened up the possibility of, okay, maybe this isn't about me. Maybe I just need um, to start to orient to this a little bit differently, to access my inner strengths and resources, to access support from other people, and to revisit how I'm engaging with these things that are hard for me. And by going through that process now, the possibilities and what she's able to do in her life has opened up exponentially. And not only has it translated into her being able to do things that she was previously stuck and unable to do, but changing the dynamic with herself. So, what she's seeing now in her relationships is that she's able to presence herself more. She's able to be more visible in relationships with other people, to presence her needs, to set appropriate boundaries, with other people, and to start to do the things or give herself more permission to engage in things that uplift her, things that she loves, or creative activities and endeavors that she's kind of held on the side. And it's all because of that change in relationship, change in dynamic of how she orients to herself, right? And so there's just another example of the way that this shows up. And you can see from these examples how it's not just about, the one piece that someone is working on, or the one thing, but really about shifting. That shift leads to a ripple effect into other areas of one's life, and it has a lot to do with our connection with ourselves. And so, just a couple final pieces on this. So, this is also different from, traditional brain retraining, and some of the brain retraining groups that are happening or operating outside of any one program in particular, in that this is a process of you being supported in stepping more deeply into self-inquiry, self-leadership, and learning how to access your deeper wisdom and inner resources. And in some cases, bring in guidance from that higher intelligence or collective consciousness that we can start to access to help ourselves to move forward. And so, the role of the facilitator in this process is to walk alongside you, to be your companion, and to guide you, often through asking very potent, specific questions and giving opportunities and experience for exercises and self reflection and experiences. That's how this work comes about or plays out in that container of support, versus the facilitator being the expert, like, I'm having the information and I'm imparting you my knowledge, and you're taking that on an intellectual level and applying that. And yes, there is information and knowledge that's shared, but it's more about, being able to embody your own inner wisdom, your own inner strengths, a different mindset and orientation. And that embodiment of that, and this generative process of being open and curious and receptive and stepping into possibility, is what actually creates the foundation for a lot more forward momentum, and opens and expands that possibility, that area of possibility and potential. So it's a very different orientation from, a lot of group work, not just brain retraining, but other group work that, people engage in. And so let's talk for a moment about self actualization. And so, I love the quote from Abraham Maslow on this topic, where he says, what a person can be, they must. This need we may call self actualization. So, what he's referring to there is this internal impulse that we have to become our best self, to achieve our full potential, that we all have that inner drive or impulse that exists within us. And lots of times, especially if we've had lots going on in our lives, or stressors or health stuff, that impulse is maybe buried under a lot of other things, but it's still there, and it's still part of our human needs. And according to positive psychology, it is a powerful component that is necessary for our well-being. And so, part of this work is tuning into that impulse and bringing that energy and momentum up and forward to help us to move forward. And so the process of self-actualization is actually very individual, and it's based a lot on each individual person's focus, their motivations, their deepest desires and longings. And that's a big part of why this work is facilitating self leadership and self inquiry, because it's not a one size fits all, perspective or way of operating. It's teaching you how to connect to that and tune into that within yourself and start to call that forward, and giving you the tools and the container and the support necessary to start to bring that up. So when we look at the pyramid of self-actualization, what it's referring to is that as human beings, we have 5 levels of need. And that, again, like I said, in positive psychology, the totality of all of those and the piece around self-actualization, this is what contributes to our overall well-being, our overall quality of life, and our experience, in this life. And so if we look at these different levels, the first level is the physiological needs. So those are the things that are related to our basic survival, right? So food, warmth, shelter, being able to rest. Then we go up, and the next level is into our safety needs. And both physiological and safety needs fit into the category of meeting our basic needs. And so safety, of course, has to do with safety and security. It's also where our health needs come into play. And then in the category of psychological needs, we have belonging and love, and we have esteem or self-esteem needs. So belonging and love needs is about that need to be connected to other people, to feel liked, loved, accepted, a sense that we belong or that we're part of a community or container. And then the esteem needs is more about that sense of feeling respected, that feeling of we're having a sense of accomplishment, or we have a sense of capability or capacity. And then, of course, the top one is our self-actualization, moving towards, fulfilling our potential. So it used to be thought that, back in the day of like Abraham Maslow, when he was looking at this, it used to be thought that these are steps along the way, and you have to meet the bottom one before you can go to the next one. It's like climbing the stairs, right? You got to do one first, and then you go to the next and to the next. And more recently, what they've realized, or what's been discovered, is that it is not, this linear or level process, that it's actually way more of a dynamic interaction between all the different levels of needs, and that working at the level of self-actualization influences our capacity to meet our physiological and safety needs, as well as our capacity to meet our psychological needs. And so there's this interplay that happens. And, one of the ways of thinking about that, so if we look at self-actualization, including our beliefs about ourselves, others, and the world, like our self-concept of who we are, how we view who we are affects our perception of being safe in the world, being safe in ourselves. It affects our perception of, or it affects our capacity to regulate our nervous system. And so that's just a really small example that kind of helps to clarify how you can see, the dynamic interplay with these pieces. It also, how we view ourselves may affect our capacity to meet our physiological needs, right? To prioritize what we need in the basics of our everyday life versus, say, prioritizing other people's needs above our own, and so on. And so, really what we want to start to look at, or what we're doing, I should say, through this work, is working at this level of self-actualization, the complex interplay and dynamics between all of these different levels. And that's why, even though we might be focusing on transcending inner barriers and inner transformation, it leads to, physiological and physical changes. It leads to changes in our relationship with others and with ourselves because of the interplay between these. All right. So let's take a little bit of time here to talk about the steps that we go through for transcending inner barriers. And so again, I don't have time today to go deeply into each of these, but it's more to give you an overview or an idea around, what each of these steps are, or how this process kind of unfolds or plays out. So the first part is really stepping into activating a growth mindset. And we're going to do that together. We're going to talk about it and start to reflect on that together here shortly. And then once we're in this place of growth and possibility, we connect with our inner resources and connect with our self-compassion, or create more of an ongoing tuning in to ourselves. And I would say, and I think I did say this maybe earlier, that these two pieces, the growth mindset and the inner resources with self-compassion or self-connection, are the foundations necessary to then be able to go into the other steps of this process. So that's building our foundation. And then the next piece that we do is to clarify and embody our vision and intention for ourselves. And this isn't like a future visualization that you might do in brain retraining. This is a process of connecting to our deepest desire, our deepest longing for ourselves and for our lives, and to be able to activate a vision of that deepest longing or desire fulfilled in a way that's sensory based, right? So we're stepping into first of all, the possibility that we can achieve that desire or that longing, and then creating an embodied visceral connection with it, so that it acts as, or operates as, our North Star, or our guiding light or force that we know that we're working towards, right? So by embodying that vision, by getting really clear on what it is, by tuning into what's most meaningful for you, that's what energizes or catalyzes that vision. And we use that, as something to work towards, as that guiding force. And the motivation and the energy that comes with that is what gives us what we need to then go into the next step of identifying the patterns that keep us stuck. So this is the assumptions that we have, the expectations that we have, the beliefs about ourselves of what is and isn't possible. It's about really stepping back into that observer and looking at, what are the old patterns that keep playing out over and over again in my life that are getting in the way of moving forward, and really getting clear and noticing how these patterns play out in a detailed way. So it's like, oh, okay, so I come up to this and I go to try and do this, and this is what happens. These are the thoughts that come up. This is the belief, or what I then do instead. This is how I behave. These are the decisions that I make. This is the choice. And it's all coming from this deeper place of, this is what I believe about myself, and this is what I think is possible. And when we have clarity on, okay, this is from that non-judgmental place of, this is the pattern, I can see how this is playing out. I can see how there's things that I'm doing or thoughts that I'm having that are maybe contributing to the reinforcement of this pattern. When we get that level of clarity or level of awareness, that allows us to start to see it for what it is, in the context of a bigger picture perspective. So we can identify the beliefs about ourselves, others in the world that are in that, but then we can also identify a deeper truth, that this isn't all that there is. It's kind of like a horse with blinders on when we're caught in those patterns and limitations. This is all that we see. And through this process, what we're doing is we're seeing more clearly what this is, but we're seeing that this is just one part of actually a bigger picture, and that when we step outside of that limitation and we connect to our resources and we connect to our growth mindset and potential and possibility, what we start to see is that there's actually other truths that are operating. And then we can start to create a new story for ourselves and for what we believe is possible and what we can start to engage in terms of taking action from that deeper truth and from that new story. So does that make sense? Hopefully you're getting what I'm saying. And so this is a process, one step, before the other, and each process or each step builds on the step before. And then once we get to a place of embodying our new story, then we're into a place of being on our growth pathway. And that's an ongoing journey of being able to identify, okay, where are we at? What is coming up? What's the next action step for us that we can take that is in alignment with this bigger vision that we created, right? So along the growth pathway, we're taking like baby steps or stepping stones, continuing to move ourselves closer and closer to that ideal, to that ultimate vision of possibility and potential. And so with, the mindsets, and again, as I said, mindsets are a really key component to doing this work. This is a foundational piece. So what we know in the area of positive psychology and transformational coaching is that the number one barrier to being able to implement growth and change, regardless of what area in our lives we're working on, like this isn't just around health, this is in any area. The number one barrier is having a fixed mindset. So when we're in a fixed mindset, we don't really believe, like if we're being totally honest with ourselves, we don't really believe that change is possible. We believe that certain things in our lives are fixed. And so some examples of that is that our level of intelligence is fixed. It's not changeable. Our personality is what it is. There's not much that we can do about that. You know, we don't necessarily think that, even in the area of health and well-being, we might have some limitations around what we believe is possible. It's like, yeah, I might make some progress, but we might not think that it's possible to really step into that ultimate well-being or thriving that, we're maybe longing for, right? And so inside this place of, yeah, there's a little bit of room for change, but it's not really big, and there's limitations to what's possible. We can see how if we're inside that mindset and we're coming up against challenges, for example, that it would be really hard to be able to navigate those challenges. And so then we start to take the challenges or the setbacks personally. We start to make it mean that, we're not good enough, right? We start to create some maybe shame-based meaning making around that, around, this is a deficit of character. That's another way to think of it. This is a deficit of character within myself. And so, of course, if that's what we're orienting, or that's our orientation, we're reluctant to take on challenges because they feel overwhelming, they feel too big. We're more likely to think negatively about ourselves and about other people. Getting feedback from other people feels threatening, right? Again, it brings up the shame of I'm not good enough because we don't believe that we can change that. We don't believe that we can act on that feedback. And so in this place, we often give up easily. We act defensively, and it's often linked to, like I said, that not good enough piece, right? That there's something maybe wrong with us, or that this is all that we're capable of. And so it's our fault that we are where we're at. And so our fixed mindsets disconnect us from our power, strength, and resources. This is a big piece of what keeps us stuck. And so it's good to just be aware of that, right? And fixed and growth mindsets are not generally we're completely in one or we're completely in another. How we see this play out is we might have more of a fixed mindset in certain areas of our lives compared to others, right? So it's more of where we're at on a continuum. So the opposite of a fixed mindset is being able to step into a growth mindset. So the growth mindset is about being open and curious, being in a place of receptivity, adopting a spirit of inquiry. That's where we're in that sort of thought processes of, I wonder about this. What's a different way that I can look at this? We're willing to experiment, we're willing to play. We're willing to try things out and we're okay with not things not being perfect or that some of the things that we might experiment with or try might not work and that's actually fuel for our learning. So we learn from our setbacks, we learn from the mistakes and challenges and we start to orient towards those as being opportunities. So rather than things that keep us stuck, these are opportunities for learning and growth. These are opportunities to be able to see, oh, maybe there's a skill or capacity that I'm needing to develop or generate to be able to help me transcend this. And, when we're in a growth mindset, it's really about adding the yet to the end of whatever the sentence is before that. So instead of I'm not there or I can't do this, it's I'm not there yet. I can't do this yet. And so that yet opens up the possibility of this isn't fixed. This isn't the way that it is or is going to be forever, that there is room to grow, that there is room to step into developing this ability, developing this skill, being able to overcome this challenge. And so this allows us to keep trying from that place of openness, receptivity, curiosity, willingness to experiment and learn from our experiences. We keep trying and we keep moving forward. And ultimately, we find what fits, right? We find that sort of key to the lock that then sticks or then opens the door and that's where we start to see changes, profound changes happening. And so I just want to see if there's anything else I wanted to say about this. So yeah, this is the mindset that we want to adopt, that mistakes are opportunities to learn and to practice new skills and to develop our capacities. And so that's been a lot of talking for me, sharing information with you for the last 45 minutes. So I'd love to pause here for a moment and to give you a chance to reflect. So in terms of the piece of fixed mindset versus growth mindset, I invite you to take a moment here now and to look at, when you've had times of struggle, what is it that you're telling yourself about it? What is it that you're making it mean? And so just taking a moment now to, write that down, to reflect on it and write that down for yourself. And the more honest you can be with yourself, the more beneficial this exercise is going to be. So really tuning into, sort of that deeper level. How am I orienting to this? What am I making it mean? I'm just going to pause here for a few minutes to give you a chance to do that. We'll just take another minute or so here to kind of wrap up your current thought on this. So this is an opportunity for us to start to practice stepping into that curious observer and non-judgmental observer to really start to see more clearly, the meaning that we're making or the assumptions and expectations that we're holding when we get caught in times of challenge or struggle. So let's go to the next part of this question. My mouse isn't working. Hold on a second. There we go. So the next part of this question is, what could you say to yourself instead if you were coming from a growth mindset or a growth orientation? And if you're already in a growth mindset, if the meaning making that you gave it would be considered part of that orientation, what is one way that you can deepen that? Taking it to the next level of a growth mindset experience. So again, just taking a few moments here to experiment. And again, for those that this is new to, a growth mindset is about being curious and open and um, challenging, some of those old assumptions, seeing ourselves in a process of learning and growth, giving ourselves permission to be human and not to do things perfectly, seeing challenges as opportunities for learning. So that might help to kind of inform you as to how you might be able to orient to this instead. And so I'm just going to pause here and give you an opportunity to think about that, reflect on that, and hopefully write it down. All right. So for some of us, our meaning making or our reactions and responses to times of struggle will trigger those self protective mechanisms, right? They trigger that stress response, they trigger that fixed mindset. And so by looking at how we can be more growth oriented, it actually helps us to stay more regulated and to open to potential and possibility so that those old defenses aren't being triggered in the same way. And so this is something that you can play with, over time when you feel called, if you're noticing you're encountering a struggle or you're coming up against something, to take that time to really step into the observer and asking yourself, what am I making this mean? And is this in alignment with a fixed mindset or a growth mindset? And that in and of itself can be very helpful, for as a life skill, not just when we're, going through a health and well-being journey, but just a skill in overall in our lives in any area that we come against challenges or barriers. And so the next piece we're going to look at is connecting to our inner strengths. So there's a great quote by Milton Erickson that says, "No problem can be solved at the same level of consciousness that created it. And we see this in, Joe Dispenza says something similar. This idea dates all the way back to Einstein. And his version is you cannot solve a problem with the same mind that created it. So, in order for us to transcend our barriers, we need to move into a different level of consciousness. We need to move into that growth mindset and to be able to connect with our inner strengths and resources as a way of changing our level of consciousness so that we can solve the problem, so that we can overcome or transcend the barrier. So, feelings of fear and scarcity come up when we're not connected to our resource self. Where we get stuck is when those stuck places of us are disconnected from the resource parts of us. So, the solution is to connect to our resources and to bring those two pieces together. And so, some ways or some questions you can pose to yourself as a way of starting to connect to your inner strengths is looking at where in your life do you feel or have you felt in the past strong, confident, and capable? And this might be in different areas, right? And so it might be in the area of work or relationships with certain people. It might be in, your cooking skills or creative endeavors. For some, it's around parenting, how they're showing up and raising their children, or creative movement, and dancing, or times where we've overcome challenges. So achieving a level of mastery through effort might be a time where we felt really strong and confident. Other questions, similar questions that can orient you towards this are, what are your biggest accomplishments so far? What are you most proud of? Where have you experienced a challenge and prevailed? Or where is it in your life that you felt most alive, most connected to your inner essence of who you truly are? All of those questions can take us to that place of connecting with our inner strengths. And so we're going to go into a guided exercise together. I'm going to guide you through a visualization to help you start to connect with your resource self. And, if you've done this before, again, this is an opportunity to deepen this practice. So see how you can bring in more of your resources, to really deepen your experience of this in this moment. All right, so I invite you to close your eyes or to do a soft downward gaze, whatever's most comfortable for you. And to take a moment to connect with your breath. So feeling your breath coming in and out of your nose. Feeling whatever you're sitting on supporting you. So your sit bones on the chair, your feet on the ground or whatever your feet are on. And just inviting in that presence and awareness and allowing yourself to be supported a little bit more by your chair or whatever you're sitting on as you connect with the breath. And then taking a hand and placing it on your heart if it feels comfortable for you to do so. And taking a moment to evoke a feeling of loving kindness towards yourself or self-compassion. So bringing up that feeling within you right now. And if you struggle to access that, you can bring up in your mind's eye someone you deeply care about and feel the love and kindness or compassion for them. And then turn that inwards. Take that feeling and turn it inwards through your intention towards yourself. Breathing it into all of your cells. And now we're going to allow our mind to float back to a time where we felt strong and confident and capable, where we felt like we were in a good, best version or better version of ourselves. So go back in your mind and relive that experience, and bring up the details of it. Where were you? What were you doing? Or what had you just finished doing? And really connect to how it felt inside you. What was that like in that moment? What are the sensations that go with that feeling? You might notice an expansion in your chest or a lengthening of your spine. You might notice a smile starting to creep up onto your face. You might feel some strength in your muscles, or there may be other sensations that go with this memory and this feeling of being strong and confident and capable. And as we continue to revisit this memory, what do you notice about yourself in this moment? What were some inner qualities that you hold or have that were really present for you in this experience? Just inviting those qualities to be even more present within you now. Taking the totality of that experience, taking it all in, really breathing it into your being and amplifying it or turning up the volume on it to whatever degree is possible for you right now. And then maybe consider what's one word or short phrase that encapsulates this experience for you. What might that be? And then taking a moment to just feel some gratitude and appreciation for yourself for taking this opportunity to start connecting with yourself in this way. And to know that this is a skill that we're building and that we can be perfectly imperfect and still get benefits. So, to whatever degree that was available for you today, just know that there's value in that and that this is something that we can continue to grow as we work with this. And so, taking in a final breath of gratitude and then coming back into the present moment, opening your eyes when you're ready, orienting back to this space. And let's just take a moment to make note of what stood out for you in that experience. So, a couple of details of that resource self, or maybe it's the qualities that you were evoking or the sensations. What stood out for you? And if you did come up with a short word or phrase, I invite you to write that down as well, because that can be an anchor that we can use to help evoke that feeling. Beautiful. So just wrapping up that thought. So I've just got a few more things to go through, Cindy, and then I'll open it up for questions. So if you can hold your question or if you want to put it in the chat so that you don't forget it, you're welcome to do that, and I'll answer it shortly here. All right. So the steps that we just went through for accessing your resource self are to start by pausing and becoming mindful in the present moment. So that's connecting to your breath, connecting to your sit bones on the chair, your feet on the ground. And then we start to take a deeper connection to ourselves. So that's where placing your hand on your heart, evoking that sense of loving kindness or self compassion comes into play. And then we invite in memories, memories of strength, confidence, and competence. And you might, if you're working with this over time, you start to go back to different times and different experiences and different memories of this. And over time, you can start to collate them together where you're really sensing the overall qualities of that, the overall sensations of that. So we're wanting to embody that, right? So it's not just an intellectual thought, it's an embodiment of what that felt like, what the sensations were, what the feelings were. And then using our anchor, so that short word or phrase that encapsulates, what this means to you to be connected with your inner strengths. And over time, what happens as we practice this and then we remind ourselves of our anchor, over time, you're building that interconnection or those neural pathways so that eventually you get to a point where you can just say your anchor, think of that word or short phrase, and it will start to evoke those feelings, that inner resources and strengths just through the anchor alone. And so that's the value of incorporating that. And so I just want to share with you the group coaching opportunity. If this work resonates with you and it's something that you want to take further, I do have a group starting on April the 25th, and it's going to run for 8 weeks. So each session is about an hour and a half per week, and it's highly interactive and experiential. So there'll be opportunities for self reflection, guided exercises, discussions, some sharing of knowledge, like I did today as well. The investment on that is $3.99 US. And if this is something that you're interested in, you can find more information on my website. There is an application form to fill out. It's pretty short, but it helps me to kind of see where you're at and whether this work is appropriate for you because it is advanced level work, right? And so not to discourage you from applying if this is resonating with you, but it's really looking at kind of where you're at in your journey and your level of readiness to take this to the next level. And so, and just let you know, I've never had an experience where it's not appropriate for someone yet. But that is just part of the process. And so the benefits of doing this work through the group, as Dr. Claire Zammit says, we cannot become our best selves by ourselves. So, especially when we're working at a level of coming up against our inner barriers or roadblocks, having support, having a container that holds us and that encourages us and helps us see maybe the things that we aren't seeing or reconnecting and reorienting to our growth mindset. That's what really facilitates the opportunity to move forward faster with this work. And so you think about this, as I said in the beginning, it is challenging work, but it's also the rewards are incredible, right? It's infinitely rewarding and it opens us up to possibilities that we might not even think at this point are possible for us, right? And the benefit of doing that in the space of a group is that we can capitalize on the group energy. So you've got the supportive container because you're confronting some pieces that may have been stuck for a really long time. You've got the supportive container to help you with that. But then you've also got the energy of the group. And so what we see within group work is that when members within a group are having new insights and awarenesses and are able to make profound shifts, that the energy of that catalyzes the entire group, that everybody benefits from that who's involved. and that it helps the group as a whole actually move forward faster or make greater gains. And so, it can be done individually and certainly with one-on-one coaching support, but there is a lot of value in a group environment for this work. And there's opportunities, once people go through the initial group of Transcending Inner Barriers, there is continuing opportunities that I will be starting in the fall for ongoing connection and support. And so what will be covered in those 8 weeks, excuse me, I got a little itchy nose here. What will be covered in those weeks is basically the steps that we talked about of the process of transcending inner barriers. So we're going to go deeply into each and every one of those. And again, remembering that this is me facilitating your own inquiry and your own self-leadership and connection to your deeper wisdom so that you can tune in and start to be able to draw up the answers and the guidance and the action steps that are most appropriate for you in your own individual self-actualization journey. And so that concludes what I wanted to share with you today. So I'm just going to stop the sharing here and spotlight myself. And so I'm going to open it up for questions. So Cindy, if you want to ask your question, now would be a great time. We'll start with you.
Hi, Candy. Thanks for offering this session, and I appreciate it.
Of
I have
course.
a specific question. This has kind of been plaguing me, I guess. I
Mm.
am in a brain retraining program right now, and really having a difficult time with visualizations. And in the
Yeah.
group, when we just did that, it surfaces again when I try to go to a place where I felt
Yeah.
confident, strong,
Hmm.
flow, as I call it. When I'm doing that, when I first started out with the brain retraining, that hadn't been a problem. And now when every time I try to visualize something, it makes me really feel tense and uneasy and anxious.
Mm-hmm.
And when I kind of tune into that and I can picture the scene, whatever it is, I mix it up. And I don't know why that is. It's very frustrating. I will say my theory is that it brings up anxiety is because my mind is saying, well, you don't have that now. Well, that was
Mm-hmm.
then. You can't, you haven't felt that way for some time. You don't have that again. It's those days are over. You don't
Mm-hmm.
have that. I'm guessing. But it's
Mm-hmm.
difficult because I know, trying to picture that and embody those good feelings are really important. And what the conundrum is not able to, I won't say I'm not able to, but it's very difficult
Yeah.
to try and do any visualizations
Right.
because that anxiety just, man, it just comes like a
Right.
buzzard
Right.
on a cow.
Yeah, so the starting place with that, I love your question. Thank you so much for your willingness to share your experience, and I'm sure we can all relate to this in some way, shape, or form, whether it's coming up against a barrier with visualization or other things. What's useful or helpful as a starting place in working with that is starting to get really curious of what actually happens when we go to do that. What are you noticing? And you're already having a level of awareness and noticing, okay, so there's anxiety, there's some thoughts. I would invite you to continue with that exploration and then add the piece of, can you come into a place of loving kindness or self compassion and turn that self compassion towards the part of you that's struggling or stuck? And by engaging in this place from loving kindness or self-compassion, really seeing that there's this part of you that's stuck, that there's this part of you that doesn't believe that you can have this, or that this has been in the past and it's not available to you anymore. When we tune into that, or when I tune into you and your description of that right now, what I sense is there's that, if we drop it down a little bit more deeply, which we can do once we connect to self-compassion, there's that sense of perhaps a little bit of fear um, around the possibility of even wanting to go there, because what if that isn't possible for you again? And that might resonate with you, or it might not in this moment. And so take it or leave it with whatever fits for you. But for a lot of retrainers, what happens, like when we kind of drop down to what's kind of below this, there is this fear and worry around, am I ever going to get better? Is this ever going to change? Am I setting myself up for doom by opening up the possibility of hope, of reaching this, reaching this expectation? And am I just setting myself up for more grief and loss? Right. And so that's just an example. Like I said, it might resonate with you, it might not, but it's really tuning into, okay, what is actually showing up? And with my loving kindness and self-compassion, turning that part of me towards this piece that's stuck here, what's below that, dropping to that next level of what's below that. And that will help to give you, some clarity and insight. So let's say it is that fear, or some variation of a fear that's keeping you from being able to access that. Then we can start to have compassion for that part that's afraid, and also connect to the part of us that knows that that's not the only truth. What else is possible? What's another deeper truth, or another truth that could be equally as possible to that? And that starts to open up for us when we're in this place of loving kindness or in connection with our resources and strengths. One last piece I want to say about that too is, if it's the visualization piece that's hard for you, don't necessarily, if you're talking about specifically working with accessing your inner resources, don't necessarily try to do it in a visualization. This is what it means to step into a growth mindset, is getting creative of how else can I do this, right? And so rather than, going inward and trying to create imagery, it might be, talking to somebody else about a memory of a favorite time, or when you felt, most like yourself. And as you're having that conversation, or you're writing about it, or you're playing with that, you might start to notice, it's like, oh, as I'm talking about this or writing about this, or telling, somebody something about it, that I start to feel that within myself. So we want to be open and creative around, how else can I get the benefit of this? It doesn't necessarily have to look this specific way in order for me to start to access that. And sometimes when we access it in these other ways, by, having a conversation, or even listening to someone else, have someone else tell you a story about when they felt most strong and capable, and your mirror neurons focusing on them will start to evoke that feeling within you. Like, there's lots of ways to start to bring that up. And when we do that, and we get creative around how else can I access this a little bit, then what often that does is opens up our capacity to maybe go back into doing it in the way of visualization. Does that make sense? Is that helpful?
Yeah, it does. I'm trying right now to just find some more creative ways, like just little, very little things instead of the
Mhm.
longer visualizations, maybe just trying to be creative. Or if I do something else besides sit and
Mhm.
center and try to visualize, if I do something else like walking, so I can,
Yeah.
to bring it in that way where I'm doing something else, does seem to help some, Candy.
Good. Yeah. So really giving yourself permission to continue that exploration, and be okay that it maybe looks differently from what we thought it should look like, right? Like, and that's part of the growth mindset. So beautiful. Yeah. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
You're
Thank you.
welcome. Anyone else? Any other questions? Yes. Let me see. Why is this not showing up? So I see someone has their hand up, but for some reason it's not showing me who it is. So whoever, just put your hand up and go ahead and ask your question.
Oh, okay, it's Joy Marie. I don't know what happened. Okay.
Hi.
Um, everything has been really wonderful. Thank you so much, Candy.
You're welcome.
And that was a good question. That was helpful, your answer. Um, oh, I just was wondering how many people would be involved in the group.
Right. So, I mean, I don't know at this point. I haven't set a maximum number. I typically find I don't have to because the people who are ready for this group, it's usually under 10, you know?
Okay.
And if we have more than 10, there's still really profound ways of working with that. This isn't the kind of thing where we have to have like a small intimate number in order for everybody to get the most benefit, right? So it's more around
Yes.
changing it up depending on the number of people that show up. But yeah, typically so far, at least I've found it's usually under 10 in a group. So hopefully that's helpful.
Thank you. Yes,
Yeah,
it's really helpful. Thank you so much.
you're welcome. All right, so we'll wrap it up there. If any other questions, like if any questions about the group itself arises that you think of after we're finished, by all means, please feel free to email me. My email is candy.thriving@gmail.com. You're more than welcome to ask questions that way. And to also, if you're continuing to experiment with accessing your inner strengths and resources or accessing self-compassion, I do actually have a few recordings on my YouTube channel that are guided practices to help you do that. The centering and resourcing one is a little bit different from what we did here today, but it's kind of along the similar vein. And I'm likely going to be adding another one that's more similar to what we did today shortly, but you're more than welcome to access that. So my YouTube channel is at candy.thriving. So feel free, to engage in that if that fits for you. And I just want to say, like, it's been a pleasure being here with all of you today. This work, I'm so deeply passionate about it because I see the profound value in it beyond all of the other trainings and things that I've offered over the years. And so I'm really delighted that I'm in a place that I can offer this. And I hope that you found some resonance and benefit with it. And I wish you all the best in your retraining journey and your journey of growth and well-being, whatever that may look like for you. So thanks again for joining and take care. Bye for now.